So, Tom, I wanted to start out with, I hate to call it this, with today's latest outburst by Pierre Poilievre, but this is something, I don't know if you've heard this, I'd not heard this up until today. He says that come time for the federal government, for the Liberals to introduce their budget, he plans to do this. Take a listen.
If the government does not meet these demands, we will use all procedural tools at our disposal to block the budget from passing, including 900 amendments, lengthy speeches, and other procedural tools that are in our toolkit.
Really? 900 amendments, Tom. What's that going to mean?
It means that they're doing their job as the official opposition. But speaking of who's got what tool in their toolbox, the government's got one that nobody else has, and it's called closure. Amongst others, they can limit debate, and they'll do that because they have their willing partner in the NDP. So Pierre Poilievre can huff and puff all he wants. He's not going to be able to blow the house down because Mr. Trudeau will simply bring in a closure motion or something similar to that, and that's like a guillotine. I mean, that just basically means the debate will stop on this day, there will be a vote, and the ruling Liberals, minority, and the NDP, that gives them their majority, will vote in favor of the budget because that's the key thing that the NDP has promised to do to support the government.
Unless, of course, the NDP are so angry over the whole David Johnson thing that they go back and tell Justin Trudeau, look, if you don't give us this...
Well, you might have missed a chapter or two because Mr. Singh has gone out of his way to explain, well, he's very upset about it, but he's so upset about the election interference that he's afraid we can't have good elections in Canada right now.
Right.
That's why we need the inquiry, and that's why we can't have an election, and that's why he's going to keep supporting Justin Trudeau.
How long did it take him to come up with that?
When he looked at his bank account balance.
I'm not sure, but I'm quite sure that most Canadians are still scratching their heads over that one.
Yeah. I mean, they're broke. They can't afford to.
Well, speaking of the NDP, I mean, if Mr. Trudeau does impose closure and it has to be brought in with the help of the NDP, I believe that will be precedent-setting because the last time they were able to avoid it and not embarrass the NDP, because, of course, it's very difficult for an opposition party to explain why it's helping the ruling party in this type of situation to curtail debate.
While we're speaking about Pierre Poilievre, the other thing that he's up in arms and outraged about is this transfer. And I'm always very reticent to say his name because I don't like to add to his infamy. But anyway, Paul Bernardo, murderer, has been transferred to a medium security facility here in Quebec. Evidently, the victims' families were not informed. There's been a weird statement released by Correctional Services Canada trying to kind of justify this. Can I just get your take on all of this, Sean?
Well, I understand people's outrage because of the horrors of what he perpetrated. But interestingly enough, by pure coincidence, I was doing Reshmi's show on News Talk 1010 when this news broke last Friday. And she had on a lawyer named Mendelson who had been a former prosecutor and who seemed to have some information about this. And he said, well, according to what he was being told, one of the reasons that he had to be transferred because there were credible threats on his life in the penitentiary where he was in Ontario. So they've moved him to a slightly less, secure institution in Lamacasa, well north of Montreal. But it's not to give him to do him a favor, and he's not getting out anytime soon. It was essentially because they do have to protect even people like Paul Bernardo from getting killed in prison. And again, this is speculation. It was from somebody who clearly knew the issue. The only person I've ever heard say that as this is being discussed, but it does seem to make some sense to me.
What about Poilievre's outrage, though? Is it justified?
Well, it's manufactured outrage because he knows that Bernardo's not getting out of jail. So whether he's in a max institution in Ontario or a medium institution here in Quebec, I don't know if you know, it's like really high up. He's not going to be having any fun up there.
Okay, let me move on and kind of switch gears here. We had a clip earlier on today from Bernard Drinville, who's apparently going to change the way French is taught in schools here in Quebec. And again, my concern here, and maybe it's unwarranted, Tom, to some degree, is it seems like, the educators, people working in the system, are the ones having less and less input here to someone who's just decided this is what we're going to do and this is how I'm going to do it. And I wondered if you shared that opinion or not.
Well, that's a really interesting two-part question, and I'll go to the first part to begin with. I think it is high time that the Quebec government, instead of beating up on minorities and the English-speaking community in the name of defending the French language, actually paid some attention to the quality and, I would dare say, quantity, the richness of vocabulary, the ability to formulate ideas in French as it's being taught in our schools. I think it's high time that they started making that a priority. So I think he's got that bit right. On the second part, where a lot of the teachers and their unions are just saying, hold on, you're centralizing everything. This is a 50-year step back that Drainville is proposing. So for 50 years, people who care a lot about public administration and study it and look at the best practices have understood that you have to leave things closest to the place where the decisions are being taken. You leave the decisions there where things actually have to take place. So that's at the school level, maybe the community level, maybe school committee level, or, what we used to have on the French side, we don't have anymore, which were school boards. They were replaced by these service centers that were supposed to do that, but no longer being elected because the government wanted to name everybody. Well, lo and behold, they didn't like that because they wouldn't do everything the government wanted. And now the government's moving in and even removing the little powers they had left. At the same time, they're pulling a stealth attack on the minority language English school boards, which are protected by the Constitution. We managed to dodge the first attempt by Legault with Bill 40. It's still in the courts, but they're never going to be allowed to do it. But they're coming back at it again, saying that they're going to name the key people and things like this. So it's a power grab by the CAC that makes no sense institutionally. When they wanted to do something with regard to this new agency in healthcare, it did make some sense because it was a system that was completely broken, and you needed to have some central command other than the incompetence at the health ministry in Quebec City. Lo and behold, when you actually read the bill that brings in this agency, the one that's in committee right now, you realize that the deputy minister of health is going to sit on the governing board, and all the staff is going to come from the health ministry. So it's a total waste of time that Christian Dubé is putting everybody through right now, especially if it's going to be based in Quebec City. And the same thing, it's going to be a complete and utter failure to ask bureaucrats in Quebec City who don't know a thing about local communities to run every single detail. It's a complete misstep by the CAC government, and it shows that they think that they can run everything right down to the tiniest detail, and it's not going to work.
Now, I should point out, Tom, and I want you to hear this clip. I think it's worth playing. As soon as you hear that there's going to be a change on the French side in education, the obvious question is, well, wait a sec, what are you planning to do on the English side? Are you going to do the same thing, changing curriculum, etc.? He was asked that question. Here's that answer.
Not at this point. We are thinking about a process which would allow us to renew the courses, whether French or English courses, on a regular basis, but this process is not yet finalized. But in the meantime, I did check, because I was anticipating this question. I did check the results of the students, high school 5, secondary 5, in English language arts reading, English language arts production. I'm talking about secondary 5 here. The English-speaking students got 90%, 90. The English students got 90%, 90. That's reading. Production, they got almost 95%, whereas French-speaking students didn't even get 70%. So you can see that there's a major problem with our French-speaking students because of this drop of 10 points. But on the English side, they're performing really well right now, which doesn't mean that we could not improve. We could certainly improve. But in the short term, we've decided to prioritize the French side because this is where it's obviously mostly needed.
Okay, so there's the lengthy explanation, Tom, followed by this when he tried to explain why it's so much better on the English side than it is on the French side. He said this.
I have no idea.
There you go. All right, so that said, Tom.
That's admirably honest. Just simply saying that, but it is a much more complicated language to learn, and the rules, of course, are much tougher.
Should we be worried on the English side? I mean, once you see these kinds of changes in the French side?
I think that on the English side, we have to continually watch what's happening with the students and monitor, but we actually have to make sure that on the English side that we avoid the trap that the CAC is trying to set for us right now, which is to allow bureaucrats in Quebec City to take over our school boards. That is a battle that we can't lose. If we want English education to survive in the province of Quebec, and we have every right for it to survive, we can't count on Trudeau to do that. We saw what he wrought with Bill C-13, and as the English-speaking community gets a chance to express itself, on June 19th in NDG Westmount, that's the type of thing that should be borne in mind.
It will be. I will be voting in that by-election. I'm just going to point out something that I said earlier, which is that the English school boards also fare better in French. And so maybe they want to be looking to us to do a better job of teaching their students French than they can do themselves.
Love that idea.
When you're learning a second language, sometimes the rules are things that you have to learn by heart, and you don't presume that you know how to express yourself. And the verb endings are going to be memorized. When you watch a 12-year-old, right, it's like EZ, ER, and E accent aigu are sort of just interchangeable. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you've learned why there's a difference between the infinitive and the third-person plural, you're going to write it the correct way.
All right, Tom, before we let you go, we mentioned earlier in the show, we're going to hear from Mai Johnson in a second, the passing of Egbert Gay. I don't know if you had a chance to work together.
And I wanted to just express my deepest condolences to all the members of his family and all of his loved ones. He was a fabulous figure, a great voice in both senses. I loved his voice, but I also loved what he was saying. He was somebody with really whose heart was on the left and was very open in society and breaking down discrimination and rules that create unfairness in our society. And removing inequalities was a big part of the battles that he always fought. And I was so sad when I got the news this afternoon. And all the best to his team at CJAD 800, the people who have worked with him so closely over the years. I know everybody must be feeling this great loss right now.
Yeah, absolutely.